It was Christmas Eve, 1945, in Fayetteville, West Virginia. The Sodder family, George, Jennie, and their 9 children at home, were settling in for the night after a quiet holiday evening. It was a scene of peace and family warmth, the kind you see in old black and white photos. But that peace was about to be shattered in the most horrific way imaginable. At 1 in the morning, Jennie Sodder woke up to the smell of smoke. The house was on fire. Panic erupted. She screamed for her children as the flames grew with terrifying speed. George, a man of action, sprang into motion. Desperate to save his family, he, Jennie, and 4 of their children managed to escape the burning house. But 5 were still trapped upstairs. 14-year-old Morris, 12-year-old Martha, 9-year-old Louis, 8-year-old Jennie, and 5-year-old Betty. George raced to the side of the house to grab his ladder, the one he always kept propped against the wall. It was the only way to reach the second-story windows where his children slept. But the ladder was gone. It had vanished. Desperate, he ran to his 2 work trucks, planning to pull them up to the house and climb on top of them. He turned the key. Nothing. He tried the second truck. Again. Nothing. Both trucks, which had been running perfectly just hours before, were dead. By the time the fire department arrived, it was far too late. The small wooden family home was consumed by a raging inferno. In less than 45 minutes, the entire structure collapsed, burning to the ground, taking with it the hopes and dreams of the Sodder family. The fire was over almost as quickly as it began. When the ashes finally cooled, a grim search began. Investigators sifted through the debris, looking for any trace of the 5 children who were believed to have perished inside. They found nothing, not a single bone, no teeth, no fragments. It was as if the children had simply evaporated. The fire chief, citing the intensity of the blaze, officially declared the children dead and closed the case. But for George and Jennie Sodder, this was impossible to accept. They knew something was terribly wrong. A fire hot enough to completely obliterate 5 human bodies, bones and all, would need to burn at an extreme temperature for many, many hours. Their house was gone in 45 minutes. How could there be no remains? This question would haunt them for the rest of their lives and kickstart one of America's most chilling and enduring mysteries. As the Sodders began to ask questions, a series of strange and disturbing details started to surface. Just days before the fire, a stranger had come to the house looking for work. He walked around the back and pointed to the fuse boxes, making a chilling comment. "This is going to cause a fire someday." Around the same time, another man was seen lurking on the property, watching the children as they returned home from school. The night of the fire, the strangeness continued. Jennie remembered being woken up by a phone call around midnight, long before she smelled the smoke. A woman on the other end asked for a name she didn't know. Jennie told her she had the wrong number and went back to sleep, but not before noticing that all the lights were on downstairs and the doors were unlocked, which was unusual. Later, after escaping the fire, she heard a loud thud on the roof, like something had been thrown. And then there was the phone line. When a telephone repairman came to check it, he made a shocking discovery. The line hadn't been burned through by the fire. It had been cleanly cut, suggesting someone had intentionally disabled their only means of calling for help: George's missing ladder. It was found weeks later, tossed into a ditch over 75 feet away from the house. Someone had deliberately taken it and hidden it that night, preventing any chance of a rescue from the outside. The 2 trucks that wouldn't start, it turned out they had been tampered with. Someone had methodically disabled their engines. This wasn't just a tragic accident. All signs pointed to a carefully planned and executed crime. But if the children weren't in the fire, where were they? Eyewitness accounts began to pour in, painting a bizarre and terrifying picture. A woman who worked at a hotel between Fayetteville and Charleston claimed she saw the children on the night of the fire. She said a car pulled into the hotel parking lot around 1 in the morning. Inside were the 5 Sodder kids, accompanied by 2 men and 2 women, all of whom appeared to be of Italian descent. She tried to speak to the children, but one of the men gave her a hostile look, and the group quickly left. Another sighting came from a bus driver. He was driving his route late on Christmas Eve when he saw people throwing what he described as balls of fire at the Sodder house. Then, a taxi driver came forward with an even more incredible story. He claimed he saw the 5 children at a restaurant about 50 miles away the morning after the fire. They were with 4 Italian-looking adults. The children were quiet and didn't speak, but they were there. So, who would want to harm the Sodder family and steal their children? George Sodder had made enemies. He was a proud Italian immigrant, but he was also fiercely anti-Mussolini. During World War II, he was very vocal with his criticisms of the Italian dictator, which led to heated arguments with other members of the local Italian community. He had been threatened. There were whispers that his business had been targeted by the local mafia for protection money, which he had refused to pay. Was this an act of political retribution, or a brutal message from organized crime? The official investigation was a disaster from the start. It was either stunningly incompetent or deliberately corrupt. Crucial evidence was mishandled or ignored. The fire chief who declared the children dead without any remains was later discovered to have found a human heart in the ashes. He claimed he secretly buried it in a metal box to spare the family more grief. When George had the box exhumed years later, the heart was found to be a beef liver, untouched by the fire. Most damning of all, just 4 days after the fire, the site was bulldozed. Against the family's wishes, George's brother, who was on the coroner's jury, brought in a bulldozer and covered the entire foundation with 5 feet of dirt, destroying any chance of a proper forensic search. Why would anyone do that? Was it a cover-up? For the rest of their lives, George and Jennie Sodder never gave up hope. They refused to believe their children were dead. They spent their life savings hiring private investigators and traveling the country, following up on every lead and every potential sighting, no matter how faint. Then, in 1967, more than 20 years after the fire, they received a mysterious letter postmarked in Kentucky. Inside was a photograph of a young man in his mid-20s. He had the same dark, curly hair and familiar features as their son Louis. On the back of the photo was a cryptic, handwritten message. It read, "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie. I the boys a 90132 or 35. The message was bizarre and never fully deciphered. The Sodders hired another private investigator to look into the photo, but he vanished after taking their money and they never heard from him again. The lead, like all the others, went cold. Undeterred, George and Jennie erected a large billboard along Route 16 near their home. It displayed the pictures of their 5 missing children, Betty, Jennie, Louis, Morris, and Martha. It offered a $10,000 reward for information leading to their recovery. That billboard became a local landmark, a heartbreaking monument to a family's undying love and a community's dark secret. It stood there for over 40 years. George Sodder died in 1969, forever tortured by the mystery. Jennie passed away 20 years later. In 1989, she went to her grave still wearing black and mourning, surrounded by the remaining children, but always with a part of her heart missing. They never got the answers they so desperately deserved. To this day, the fate of the Sodder children remains one of America's most haunting, unsolved cases. Were they killed in that Christmas Eve fire? Their remains somehow completely destroyed in a way that defies explanation. Or were they kidnapped, taken in the dead of night by powerful enemies, and forced to live out their lives under new identities, never knowing their true family? That photograph of the man who looked so much like Louis Sodder suggests it's possible. Nearly 80 years have passed. The questions remain. A family was torn apart. 5 young lives vanished into the smoke and shadows of a Christmas night. This isn't just a ghost story. It's a real story about a real family whose search for the truth should never be forgotten. The truth may still be out there, waiting to be found. And do UNT forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you do UNT miss our next investigation into the mysteries that history has left behind.